What's up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another episode of Go Talk Markets, powered by, wow, I haven't said that in a long time. Almost messed up there. Presented by the Give Us a Shot Network today. Joining me literally like 5 minutes before we just went live is my guy, Emmett Savoras, the ultimate pitch hitter, and I truly appreciate it. Today, we're going to talk all things NFL season. As we know, the 2023-24 NFL season kicks off tomorrow as Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions head to Arrowhead to take on Patrick Mahomes and the defending champion Kansas City Chiefs. So we're going to talk about anything that we can talk about as far as the NFL season. We're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers, we're going to talk about Trevor Lawrence, we're going to talk about some defense, talk about some offense, give a couple of predictions, all of that and so much more next on Go Talk with Marcus.
Give them a shot to do what?
Emmett, my guy, what's up, bro? How you doing today?
Dude, I'm doing pretty good. Again, as you were, talking about a little bit of a last minute thing, but I'm always down to talk sports with you, brother. So, let's have some fun.
We are absolutely going to have some fun. Got to start off on what could maybe be a bittersweet moment for us. In the great words of Booker T, the all-time great wrestler Booker T, Aaron Rodgers with the New York Jets is looking to do something that very few, actually, only one other person in the history of the league has done, and that is become a five-time NFL MVP. Emmett, will Aaron Rodgers tie Peyton Manning this season for the most MVP awards won in a career at 5?
I would really love to say yes. I really would, because I think as a lot of Packer fans, I think, are wishing the Jets ill will this season. And again, it makes sense. If Aaron Rodgers plays 65% of the snaps, we get their first round pick. If Aaron Rodgers plays a bunch of snaps and they do bad, we get a better first round pick. That's something that obviously as a Packer fan, you would want. Me, I've been an Aaron Rodgers fan my entire life. Again, Packers over Aaron Rodgers. But if somebody were to tell me, hey, if you root for him, Aaron Rodgers would win a Super Bowl this year, I'm rooting for Aaron Rodgers to win a Super Bowl. He's at this point, he's my favorite player of all time. Used to be Brett Favre, but I will refrain on commenting any further. But I would love to see him win a Super Bowl. And an MVP, if he's having an MVP level season, I think that's a way that we can see the Jets potentially get to the Super Bowl. But I can't say yes. I just can't. I think that one of the problems that we're going to see with this Jets offense, although I haven't really decided if I have them winning the division or not. I think they make the playoffs. But one of the problems we're going to see with this Jets offense is very similar to what we saw in Green Bay. Granted, he did win the Super Bowl. Or not the Super Bowl, sorry. He did win 2 MVPs, but a lack of pass catchers. Garrett Wilson is going to take the Devontae Adams role. Allen Lazard is going to take the Allen Lazard role. Mecole Hardman probably takes over the MVS role. Are any of these players really significantly better than any of the pass catchers we had in Green Bay? Even if you go and take a look, throughout their, is Breece Hall, I know he's getting a lot of hype right now. Is he better than Aaron Jones? Because I don't think he is currently. We take a look, Dalvin Cook. I always had Aaron Jones above Dalvin Cook. But especially with Dalvin Cook, he's kind of there to be the RB2, which I guess, puts him in a good position. But then tight end, does CJ Uzama really move the needle for you much more than Robert Tonyan did? I don't think so. And I think especially year one in a new system to everybody else involved, maybe not a new system to Aaron Rodgers, but to everybody but Allen Lazard and Randall Cobb involved, it's a brand new system for them. And so I think we could see, especially at the beginning of the year, we could see some rough stretches. I think that we are going to see a better Aaron Rodgers that we saw, a better Aaron Rodgers than we saw in 2022, right? 26 touchdowns, 12 picks. That's very un-Aaron Rodgers-like. I think we could see something maybe a little bit closer to his 2015 stats, where he had 31 touchdowns, 8 picks, or even, I doubt it's going to go this far, but 2019, he had 26 touchdowns, 4 picks. He wasn't really in the MVP conversation, but he was definitely he looked competent enough. And I think that might even just be what the Jets are looking for. They don't need superstar quarterback play. I mean, I guess to get out of the AFC, you're probably going to need some superstar moments from your quarterback, but they don't. This is not a team like the Packers where it was like, all right, Aaron, like either you're going to win us this game or we're not going to win the game at all, sort of thing, where it was like it's 12 or bust. And I don't think that the Jets need that. And then even if they did need him to do that, I'm not sure that the weapons that he currently has, because I think Adams probably was better than Garrett Wilson is at this point. I don't think that's like a hot take. I think Lazard is probably a wash as a player. And I think that Rodgers had a little bit more chemistry with MVS than he's going to have with, 3 months of McCole Hardman. So I'm going to lean towards no, that he's not going to win an MVP. Although I could see a world where it happens, but I don't think it happens this year.
I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to say no, he's not going to win MVP. There's just too much talent. I think, as we know, right, quarterback, MVP, historically quarterback award. Pat Mahomes, who is the reigning MVP, is going to be in there because his name is Patrick Mahomes. Jalen Hurts, who is the runner-up, is going to be in there because, especially if he duplicates what he did last season, because he's just that good. I think that Joe Burrow is going to be in the running this year, more so this year than he was last year. I know he was kind of in it in the beginning, but then what Jalen Hurts did was just so prolific that it kind of overshadowed what Joe did. I do think Joe Burrow is going to be in the conversation a bit more firmly. I actually have Joe Burrow winning MVP this year in Cincinnati. I do think if everyone stays healthy, and it's a big if, I do think if everyone stays healthy, Justin Herbert can win MVP because he's always had the numbers. He just hasn't had the wins to go with the numbers to be truly in the MVP conversation. There's a lot of people that think that Lamar Jackson can return to MVP form, and he could be in the conversation as well. Let's give respect to Josh Allen. Maybe Josh Allen could be in the conversation. Me personally, I think we'll talk about him in a second. I actually think that Trevor Lawrence has a good shot at winning MVP this year as well. That's 7 quarterbacks alone already and we haven't even gotten to Aaron Rodgers. We haven't even gotten to like the Justin Jeffersons in the world who can maybe surprise people to become MVP, the first wide receiver to win the world. We haven't talked about maybe the Derrick Henrys of the world who knows, the Titans could shock us and go crazy, and it could be because of Derrick Henry, and maybe Derrick Henry could win the MVP award as well. There's a lot of people that think that Christian McCaffrey can win Offensive Player of the Year. There's a strong argument to be made that depending on the kind of season he has, Christian McCaffrey could potentially be in the MVP conversation as well. There's also some defensive players in the league that could be the MVPs of their team. I don't think they would win it, obviously, but they could potentially, depending on what their season looks like, be in the running. Your TJ Watts, your Nick Bosa's, who just got paid today with his extension, 5 years, massive deal, holdout, not going anywhere. Shout out to Steezy because he was happy for the holdout. But your Micah Parsons of the world, your Myles Garrett's of the world. Like, there's so many players. And so for Aaron Rodgers, you're right. The goal is not MVP quarterback play from Aaron Rodgers. The goal for the Jets to be successful, the goal for the Jets to win the division, the goal for the Jets to make noise in the AFC and particularly win a Super Bowl this year is not MVP caliber Aaron Rodgers. It is simply, it is all pro. I wouldn't even say superstar Aaron Rodgers. Give me all pro Aaron Rodgers. Give me that 2015 Aaron Rodgers you were talking about. Give me an all pro Aaron Rodgers that can show up there, put the ball where it needs to be, and lead this team to victory. That's what they need. Because of that, I don't think he's going to win his 5th MVP of the year. But if he does win MVP, of course, the Jets, of course, would obviously be in a great place. The one thing for me, though, is I don't want him to win MVP because if he wins MVP, that means the Jets win a lot of games. And I agree with you. I want him to play 65% of the snaps. I also want the Jets to suck so we can have the best possible first-round pick heading into the 2024 NFL draft. Speaking of quarterbacks, let's shift gears. We're going to stay in the AFC, but let's move forward. Let's talk now about Trevor Lawrence. They had an amazing season last season, amazing second half of the season down there in Duval County for the Jacksonville Jaguars, obviously winning the AFC South and making it to the division round and losing ultimately to the eventual champion Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead. To me, no shame in that because no one's been able to, only 2 teams have been able to go into Arrowhead and get the job done in the playoffs. If you are Trevor Lawrence, if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars, is this the season where Trevor Lawrence can officially cement himself potentially as a top 5 quarterback? Because I think he's already top 10. Can he put himself in the top 5 conversation come season's end this year?
I think he's already top 5 personally. That's just me. I'm super high on Trevor Lawrence, and I understand that I am probably higher on him than a lot of other people. But I mean, you just take a look at what he did in his second year as opposed to his first year in the league. He increased in every single statistical category: completion percentage, yards per attempt, touchdown. He threw double the touchdowns. He threw half the interceptions. He got sacked less because I think that sacks for the most part Like, yes, they can be an offensive line stat, but I think they're equally a quarterback stat as well. His passer rating went up and his QBR went up. I mean, he is literally across the board a lot better. And that, I mean, like his rushing stats too, very similar. I mean, he scrambled or he rushed for another 5 touchdowns last year. I think that Trevor Lawrence is in that same Justin Herbert category where it's like, depending on the week, almost they can be like, man, this guy like could potentially like knock off Mahomes in terms of like best player in the league. I don't think they ever will. I'm just going to say that, but they have the talent to be able to, right? Like they are at this point in time, they're the perfect modern quarterbacks, Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence. They're tall, right? You can be stand up stiff in the pocket. They're also mobile. They have rocket arms. They have everything you could possibly want from them. And I realize that this doesn't necessarily always translate to the NFL, but they're from big college programs. That matters. Stuff like that, I believe, matters. And listen, like, obviously it doesn't always translate over to the NFL, but it's like these guys are in, Power 5 schools, like in the best schools in their conferences while they were there. But I think Trevor Lawrence has already arrived. And I think that we're going to see an even bigger step up from what we saw in between year 1 and 2. I think that we're going to see an even bigger step in between 2 and 3, because we look at his rookie year stats, not great. 12 touchdowns, 17 picks. Then you look last year, 25 touchdowns, 8 picks. And we're not even talking about the gigantic comeback that he had in the playoff game against Justin Herbert, right? I mean, like, he threw a bunch of interceptions in that first half. And yeah, that's not great. However, one of the things and one of the most important things that he showed that I think, man, I wish Aaron Rodgers took some notes from this. All those interceptions, flush. Get it out of the head. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. We're still in this game. Whereas I think a guy like Aaron Rodgers, sometimes you can see those interceptions really do affect him. They didn't affect Trevor Lawrence. It didn't matter that he threw, what was it, 4 first half interceptions?
I think he threw 3 or 4 first half.
It was 3 or 4. Yeah. And he winds up bringing them all the way back. I think he's already arrived, and I think that Calvin Ridley is going to be a huge part of that, man. A huge part. We forget what Calvin Ridley looked like in Atlanta. Calvin Ridley was so good in his first couple years in Atlanta that they decided, and granted, he was getting older. We're good, Julio. You can go somewhere else. We're good. We like Calvin Ridley. That's how good Calvin Ridley is. And I think he's going to come back. And I think that, as opposed to like where we saw like with Deshaun Watson, where he looked a little bit rusty, I don't think we're going to see that from Calvin Ridley, as it's, well, one, a different position. But I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see what Calvin Ridley looks like in that offense. I think that we're going to be looking at Trevor Lawrence. You talked about him being in the MVP conversation. I think he's going to win MVP this year. I think it should always be Patrick Mahomes. But I think Trevor Lawrence is going to win MVP this year. He's going to look unreal.
Look, I think I have Trevor Lawrence actually as my runner-up for MVP. That's how high I am on the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think so. Let's do it. Pat Mahomes, number 1, class by itself, obviously. I would say the only other quarterback in a class by themselves is Joe Burrow. He's the only quarterback that's A, beaten Pat Mahomes multiple times, but also B, you look across like other quarterbacks in the league, he's better than all of them. So I would have Pat Mahomes 1 in his own tier, in the S tier, and I would say that Joe Burrow is in like the A+ tier by himself. I do think that Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts are on the same tier. Those are the only 4 quarterbacks, in my opinion, that are definitively better than Trevor Lawrence heading into the season. The only 4, right? Can you make an argument for Justin Herbert? I would say so, and I do think that Justin Herbert, for me, rounds out my top 5. For me, with Justin Herbert, yeah, like the team hasn't been great, but they haven't been healthy and the coaching hasn't been that great. When you look at what Justin Herbert has done statistically, overall and on a year-to-year basis, completion percentage, highest ever to start a career. Passing yards, most ever. Touchdowns, most ever. Interceptions, like he has had So Pat Mahomes has had the greatest start to a career ever as far as accolades are concerned. But if you want to look at it by the numbers, there is no quarterback in history that has had a better start to their career statistically than one Justin Herbert. I would put Trevor Lawrence at number 6. I don't think that Lamar Jackson's better than Trevor Lawrence. I know that Dak Prescott's not better than Trevor Lawrence. I know that Derek Carr and the Aaron Rodgers and all those other guys are not better than Trevor Lawrence. For me, at worst, Trevor Lawrence is the 6th best quarterback in football. At best, he's the 4th or 5th. By the end of this season, I think Trevor Lawrence will firmly have a stake in the 4th slot in the league. And here's why. Jalen Hurts, I think, has already used – I think There's an argument to be made about whether or not Jalen Hurts has surpassed Josh Allen. I think Jalen Hurts will cement himself as the third best quarterback in football after this season. Josh Allen turns the ball over way too much for my liking. And when you look at someone like Dak Prescott, and I've said this so many times, don't believe me, check the tape. There's a lot of people that harp on the fact that Dak Prescott led the league in turnovers last year, interceptions last year. He had 15, and he missed 5 games. Josh Allen had 14, number one. Number two, Josh Allen had the most red zone turnovers by a quarterback anybody, like double. He had like 8 or 9, and no one had even half of that between interceptions and fumbles. So for me, Josh Allen, super talented, but he also turns the ball over a lot. We saw last year that Trevor Lawrence takes good care of the football. And if you're taking good care of the football in this league, that means your team is most likely winning a lot of games. To me, by the end of the season, Trevor Lawrence can firmly, undeniably cement himself as the 4th best quarterback in football behind Mahomes, Burrow, and Hurts. I think Josh Allen's going to move down this year. I think the Bills will be great. I do think they're going to win double-digit games. I think they'll be in the playoffs. Of course, they're a playoff team. But Josh Allen is going to slide down in the quarterback rankings this year. I think at best, we're going to have to start talking about Josh Allen as being the 5th best quarterback in football at best. And if Justin Herbert has a big year, the way that I think he will, we could talk about Josh Allen being out of the top 5 all together. Really quickly, before we move forward, there is a super big announcement that I want to make. In case you do not follow me on Instagram or you do not have my number, Go Talk with Marcus merch is now officially available on the Give Us a Shot Network website. Go to the link down below, www.giveusashot.network/shop, and get your shirts today. They have them available in the black shirt, as you see there, also in purple and white. So all 3 Goat Talk colors you can get the shirt available in. Sizes, I believe, all the way from adult small to, I think I saw 5X on there earlier when I was checking it. So if you got it, if you want it, we got it. They just dropped today. Head over to giveusashot.network/shop. When you get to the shop, if you click on the filter and sort by latest, it'll pop up at the very end. I don't know exactly what page number it's on regularly, but if you just click the latest and you refresh it, it'll be the first one there. Again, Go Talk and Markets merch is now available on Give Us a Shot Network. Let's talk defense, bro. Because there's a lot of guys in the league that can make a strong argument, a super strong argument, to be the best defensive player in the game. And we talked about some of them earlier. You have the T.J.Watts, your Aaron Donalds, of course. You've got Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa, who just signed that extension earlier today. You have Myles Garrett, maybe even a Sauce Gardner, right? There's so many great defensive players in the league today. If you had to put all your money on one guy, who would you say is the best defensive player in football today?
The best defensive player, it's so tough because I think that especially like defensively, like it's truly like you could probably give best defensive player to any 11 that's out there. Like offense, like best offensive player. It's probably going to be a quarterback or a wide receiver, like probably, but like defensive tackles, right? Aaron Donald, Chris Jones, edges, right? T.J. Watt, Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa, linebackers like Fred Warner is fantastic. Like
Absolutely.
you can move pretty much anywhere except for I would argue probably safety. Probably at this point, I don't think there's a one of those like all time greats who has an argument for best defensive player in the league. I don't think we currently have that.
Maybe, I would say
Minka.
If they weren't healthy, I would say Minka or Derwin James, but they've had some health issues. But yeah, I would. And then,
but it's like corner isn't like Jalen Ramsey was there for a while, right? Sauce, I think could potentially make a case this year. I look at this and I find it very difficult to say that Micah Parsons doesn't walk away this year with the Defensive Player of the Year award. I think it's going to be very tough for somebody to knock off Micah Parsons. And here's why. I think that one of the underrated additions that the Cowboys made this offseason was Stephon Gilmore. Why is that so important? That's so important because Anthony Brown was getting torched last year for the most when he was playing.
Boat raced off the line every time.
A lot. It happened way too much.
Yeah.
Now you knock everybody one peg down. Hey, Anthony Brown, he's not currently on the roster anymore. But Deron Bland, he was a huge standout player for the Cowboys last year.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to guard the number 2. He can go guard their number 3. And what's that going to do? Everybody is going to be holding on to the ball versus Dallas. And if they're holding on to the ball, Micah's coming. Micah, I think I don't think he breaks a sack record this year, but I think that the number of sacks he has starts with a 2. I do. I think we're probably looking at a 20 sack season. I could see him anywhere in that range from like 21 down to about 18 and a half. He's only had 13 and a half was his career high last year. And one of the problems that we do see with Micah is he does go a little bit hot and cold. Like I think last year there was a stat going there for a while where it's like he didn't have like just one sack in any game except for the playoff game versus Tampa, and some other ones down the stretch. But it's like, okay, he had 2 in the opener versus Tampa, 2 versus Cincinnati, 2 versus the Rams, 2 versus Detroit, 2 versus Minnesota, 2 versus the Giants. Then he had 1 versus Jacksonville and then a half sack versus Washington and those 2 losses. But you look in there, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10 if we count the San Francisco game. 10 games where he didn't have a single sack. I think.
Can you real quick those 10? Obviously, the San Francisco game they lost was a playoff game. Of the 9 regular season games, did they win all those games? I think they did. Didn't they win all those games?
I think they did. So they beat the Giants, beat Washington. They lost to Philly, but again, they had Cooper Rush at quarterback. So, I don't think that's going to be a huge thing. Chicago. Chicago, they wound up they lost to the Packers in overtime, but then they beat the Colts, beat the Texans, lost to Jacksonville where they only got 1 sack. They beat Philadelphia, no sacks. They beat Tennessee. So for the most part, they still were able to win their games. But when they went up against good competition and he wasn't getting a ridiculous amount of sacks or pressures, they lost, right? In that playoff game versus the 49ers, no sacks, they lost. Yeah. Half sack against Washington, they lost. 1 sack versus Jacksonville, they lost. Green Bay, 0 sacks, they lost. Philly, no sacks,
that was also,
they lost.
That Jacksonville game was also a sloppy game offensively.
Complete. Yeah. Well. Yeah. It was one of the worst offensive games I've seen the Cowboys play. And I've watched pretty much every game that they've played in, probably dating back to 2008 because of my dad being a Cowboys fan. But I think that Micah Parsons, because he's going to, none of these guys, none of the quarterbacks that they're playing this year, I don't really see a guy who I think is going to carve them up for the most part. Jalen Hurts is probably, the best quarterback they play. And again, he's no slouch. I don't want to sound like that.
Of course.
But, he's playing against Daniel Jones twice. He's playing against Sam Howell twice. He's going to be playing against insert Cardinals starting quarterback here, Mac Jones, Matt Stafford, if he's healthy by then, Bryce Young, a lot of guys, Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts are probably the 2 guys on there who scare you. But I see them going out and I see them winning a bunch of games, but I see him getting, into the 20s in terms of sacks. And hard to not win defensive player of the year if you're going to be up there.
So here's what I would say. I think for me, the best defensive player in the game is always going to be a pass rusher, unless there's a cornerback that's just changing the game. Do you know what I mean? So when you talk about your Ed Reeds, your Champ Baileys, your Deion Sanders, the Darrelle Revises of the world, like players that are shutting down an entire half of the field, that is when I will look at a defensive back or a safety and say, that's the best defensive player in football. That's just me. No disrespect to Sauce Gardner, Pat Surtain, any of those guys. That's just me. So for me, who the best defensive player in football is boils down to 4 or 5 guys. It's either going to be Nick Bosa, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, or Micah Parsons, or Aaron Donald, just because of who he is.
It's hard. It's hard to leave him out. It's really hard. Him not being in the 4 that I mentioned, kind of sounded wrong. But I think as he's getting up there in age, plus again, it's 1 versus 11 out there. Kind of tough for him to do anything when he's getting triple teamed. It really is.
Yeah. So of the 4, really, for me, I think Micah Parsons is the best defensive player in the game. And if he's not, he will become season's end. I agree with you. I think the Stephon Gilmore addition is great. This is a guy that has led the league in interceptions before. This is a guy that is now going to be playing alongside Trayvon Diggs, who last season got better defensively, right? There are a lot of people who love Trayvon Diggs because he got all these picks. And as I explained, the year he had all the picks and led the league in interceptions, he also led the league in passing yards allowed. He also led the league in touchdowns allowed. He also led the league in most blown coverages in the league. He's one good. He's getting picks, but there's another side of it. So to your point, when you have a secondary that is strong like that, you have a guy like Micah Parsons. Now, all Micah Parsons has to do is he just has to pin his ears back and go get that quarterback. And for me, Micah Parsons, I think, is not only the defensive player of the year this year. Not only is Micah Parsons, I think, the best defensive player in football. I think Micah Parsons is going to break the sack record this year. I think we saw T.J. Watt a couple years ago tie Michael Strahan's record, 22 and a half. If there's one guy that can do it this year and get at least 23, it's Micah. Because like you said, he shows us dominant stretches where he can get at least 2. Let's do some simple math here, okay? There's 17 games in a season. If Micah Parsons plays all 17 games and gets a sack and at least one sack in every single game, all that means is he just needs 6 games where he needs 1 more sack. And last year he had at least 6 games from what you listed, at least 6 games where he had 2 sacks. So getting 2 sacks isn't the issue. The issue for Micah Parsons is getting at least 1 sack in every single game, which I don't think is that difficult for him to do. I think what happened is in those games specifically, the defensive game plan maybe changed. The secondary wasn't doing what it needed to do, and they were getting carved up. He couldn't get back to the quarterback in time. Not only are they not playing that many great quarterbacks this year, they're not playing that many great offensive lines this year. The only super good offensive line they're playing this year is in Philly, and they're playing them twice a year. Now, Don't get me wrong. I like New York's offensive line. They play them twice a year, but New York's offensive line, I don't think is going to be able to stop Micah Parsons. I know that the Commanders won't be able to stop Micah Parsons twice a year because their offensive line isn't that great. I don't know their entire schedule off the top of my head. I do know they play the Jets. I think the Jets O-line is okay. Not okay. The Jets have a solid O-line. I don't know if it's solid enough to keep Micah Parsons from getting Aaron Rodgers at least once or twice in a game.
I don't think
so. I think Micah Parsons is the best defensive player in the game. Micah Parsons is my pick to win Defensive Player of the Year. Micah Parsons is, if I had to pick a record to be broken this year, I think Micah Parsons can get 23 sacks this year and become the new all-time sack leader in a single season. Put me on the record for it. I'm going to clip it. I'm going to post it because I definitely think it's true. You mentioned Bryce Young because the Cowboys played the Panthers this year. Bryce Young, first overall pick in the draft. C.J. Stroud, second overall pick in the draft. Anthony Richardson, third overall pick in the draft. The Mayo Man, Will Levis, second round pick because he's not a good quarterback. Who do you think is going to have the best rookie season of the 4?
Well, I think that Bryce Young is probably the best answer here. And I think that a lot of it isn't even necessarily about Bryce Young, but I think it's the position that he's been put in, right? I think he has himself a good offensive head coach in Frank Reich, right? He also has Andy Dalton as the backup quarterback, a guy who's played a bunch of snaps in the NFL. He's led multiple Bengals teams to the playoffs. Didn't win any games, but he's led them to the playoffs. I think he also has Josh McCown. I believe it's Josh. Maybe it's Luke. Josh McCown. I think it's Josh McCown as the quarterback coach there in Carolina, or at least on the coaching staff. I think that helps out a lot. And then you take a look, and across this chart, like the depth chart, out of all the ones, I'm not even counting Will Levis because I'm not a huge believer in him. I'm just kind of looking at Richardson, Stroud, and Bryce Young. You look, and out of the weapons, granted, none of them have like great weapons, but I think Bryce Young probably has the most adequate. Because let's look, C.J. Stroud's probably the guy that I'm the lowest on out of this. It's like he has Nico Collins, Robert Woods, and Noah Brown. Yikes. He obviously has Dalton Schultz at running back and Dameon Pierce at his running back, but those aren't really guys who are going to be able to help him out a whole lot. Plus, I'm not a massive fan of that offensive line. Obviously, Laramie Tunsil's really good, and so is Shaq Mason. But I think that George Fant starting as your right tackle in 2023, probably not something that's super great. Then we take a look at the Colts. Jonathan Taylor is doing what exactly? I don't know. He's on the PUP currently. I don't know if he's going to remain in Indianapolis. Maybe he gets traded, right? Obviously, the Packers and the Dolphins apparently both made offers. But like, if you take away Jonathan Taylor, it's kind of Michael Pittman and who else, right? Zach Moss is the next highest running back on the depth chart. Then you have Alec Pierce, who wasn't great last year. Josh Downs is a rookie. We'll see how he does. Kylan Granson and Mo Alley Cox is your tight ends. Not exactly great. That offensive line also took a massive step back last year. They were not on the same level that we thought they were going to be. If they are on the same level, I could see Anthony Richardson being very Justin Fields-like, whereas he kind of develops as a passer, we see him as he develops as a passer, we see him make explosive plays in the run game. And I do like that he has Gardner Minshew as a backup, again, another guy who has played a bunch of games there to help him out. But then you look at the Panthers. Miles Sanders, a guy who produced a lot last year, and then Chuba Hubbard, a guy who was basically their starting running back last year after the CMC trade. He's now their second string. They have a bunch of a couple of veteran receivers in Adam Thielen, who's used to being a 2, but I think he can be like a low end 1. DJ Chark, who just left from Detroit and showed up there. Even Terrence Marshall Jr., a guy who has a lot of talent. Laviska Shenault, they have some second round picks there. Jonathan Mingo, Hayden Hurst is a tight end. And then I'd say young offensive line, but I think it's one that we can see improve throughout the year. Right? Like Ika Makwana was their 7th overall pick last year. I just think that they have their quarterback, Bryce Young, is in a lot better of a position than a lot of these other guys are. If you put Bryce Young or if you put CJ Stroud in Carolina, I think I'm probably leaning CJ Stroud. If you put Anthony Richardson in Carolina, I think I'm probably leaning Anthony Richardson, right? Just because of the situation around Bryce Young, because I think that that's going to be really tough to beat. And I honestly think that I could see he's the only one out of this group that I could see winning their division. I can see the Panthers doing it. And granted, that's not because they're going to be so awesome. That division kind of stinks right now.
Just sucks. Yeah.
That division sucks. But I think that like we could see, if he like has a winning record in the division, right? 4-2, and you take a look down the rest of their schedule, they don't play anybody like super duper tough, right? They have to play the NFC North. There's worse divisions in the NFC you could play, right? The NFC North is probably one of the worst ones. And then you take a look at the AFC, they're playing the AFC South. So he's going to get to play against Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud and whatever's going on in Tennessee, right? He's going to get to do that.
Yeah.
So I could see Carolina and Bryce Young having the best year of all these rookie quarterbacks.
I 100% agree with everything that you said, but I think there's one more thing that I think that you didn't really touch on that I think is the big thing. He's the best quarterback in the draft, which is really all.
There's that too. That too.
Which I think, like, he's the best quarterback in the draft, and so when you're Bryce Young, what I say is like I love CJ Stroud. I love what he was able to do in Ohio State, and I think he's going to do good things, but not this year. There's not a lot to work with out there in Houston. I am not all that sold on Anthony Richardson, but he has a lot of boom bust potential. And his boom potential, I think, puts him in a situation where he can have the highest ceiling in the draft of all of these guys. But his bust means he can have one of the lowest floors. I don't think he have a lower floor than Will Levis, because Will Levis, I think, is absolute dog water or Mayo coffee, whatever you want. But it ain't a good floor. Bryce Young's the best quarterback in the draft. And when you're the best quarterback in the draft and you're put in such a friendly situation, we didn't even talk about the defense either. And I know Bryce Young plays offense, so it's like, what does defense have to do? Well, like, look, complementary football. That defense, I think, is going to be a top 10 defense this year. And what that means is you're going to be talking about a scenario where Bryce Young can be in a lot of short field situations. Bryce Young can be in a lot of situations where he doesn't have to do so much with the football, where they're not going to be put in a position where they have to throw it every single down because they're just out of it. Do you know what I mean? When you have a Miles Sanders and a Chuba Hubbard, when you have an Adam Thielen, when you have a DJ Chark, when you have the O-line they have, you put him in a really good position to just go out there and just be himself. Just go out there and work through those. He's not going to light up the scoreboards necessarily. He might not necessarily light up the box score the way that we saw like a Justin Herbert do it in his rookie season, or maybe a Pat Mahomes or someone like that. But he's still going to be a really good quarterback. I think not just this year. I think Bryce Young's going to be the best quarterback in this draft class by far. 5, 10, 15 years down the line, because he's just in the best situation. My one hesitation is whether or not the Panthers will do right by him. We saw a highly touted number 1 overall former Heisman winning draft pick by the name of Cam Newton get drafted out of Auburn to the Carolina Panthers. They were doing good by him for a bit. He started getting hurt, and they kind of just flaked on him. And we didn't get to see Cam post-injury come back and beat Cam. If the Panthers don't bail on Bryce Young the way that I think they bailed on Cam Newton, Bryce Young is undeniably going to be 10, 15, 20 years down the line the best quarterback in the draft class from a career standpoint. And we're talking multiple playoff appearances, maybe a Super Bowl appearance, and a win, depending on how things go. I think Bryce Young's that good. He'll have the best year this year. I don't think he'll win Offensive Rookie of the Year. We'll talk about that in just a second. But Bryce Young is going to have the best year this year.
And to kind of like, talk about your point of like them not doing right by Cam Newton, I think one of the things that helps out Bryce Young is that it's a completely different regime. If I'm not mistaken, ownership has changed over, GM has changed over, obviously head coach has changed over. So there isn't, it's a different, it's still the Carolina Panthers. It's a different organization than it was back when Cam was running the place.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really quickly, because we're going to get out of here in just a second. This is a new segment. We're doing it for every show throughout the course of the NFL season from today until Super Bowl Sunday. It's called 2-Minute Drill. We're in the final 2 minutes of the show. I'm going to give you a couple quick fire answers. I just want some super quick yes or no with a quick explanation. We're doing a preview show today, though. We're going to talk about some awards. We talked MVP. We kind of talked about Defensive Player of the Year. Emmett, who's your offensive rookie and defensive rookie of the year this year?
Oh my gosh, I need to pull up the draft class. I'm like, I don't know why I'm blanking. I think offensive rookie of the year, I'm probably it usually goes to a quarterback unless a wide receiver kind of has like a massive breakout season, but I don't necessarily see that happening. So I'm gonna go Bryce Young. We talked about why I think he's probably the best quarterback in this class. Defensive player in the year, man, it's very hard for me to see if he gets the snaps that he needs. How is it not Jalen Carter, right? I think that he's the best defensive player in this class, and if he can stay on the field, he's going to win it.
Coach of the year.
Coach of the year, I think it's probably going to be one of the newer guys. I think DeMeco Ryans, we could potentially see. I don't know if they necessarily win a whole bunch of games, but I think it could be something where we definitely see the culture shift. Again, not on the level of a Brian Daboll, but I think that we could see them, we look at the end of the year and we're like, that is a way better coach team than I thought it was.
Super Bowl champ.
Hard to not say Kansas City.
Comeback player of the year.
I think that probably the award goes to Damar Hamlin. It's very hard for me to not see it going to Damar Hamlin. That'll be my answer. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else who has had some sort of injury that I'm trying to think could potentially come back, or even somebody who like fell off. But I think it's probably going to go to Damar Hamlin.
And very last question: give me your Super Bowl matchup.
Man, I've thought about this one a lot, and I hate it because last year was the first time I ever picked the Packers to win the Super Bowl and blew up right in my face.
Really?
Not win the Super Bowl. Go to the Super Bowl.
Really?
Ever. Yeah, I don't pick them often. It's
really?
like a
Well, that's a good point. I was super hesitant to when we were 13-3 the second time.
The Brady year. Yeah.
Or the Brady year.
Yeah.
If you guys remember, I waited until the last week of the season to say we're the best team in football because I was like, ugh.
Yeah. So yeah. I hate like putting pressure on teams that I like enjoy watching like that.
Sure.
Obviously, the Chiefs out of the AFC can't win the Super Bowl if you're not in the Super Bowl. Man, out of that NFC, I think it's them boys. I think Dallas. I think if they have the defensive player of the year, if they have what I think is an improved receiver core, they have an improved defense. It's hard for me to not see them there. It is. And again, I understand that Philly and San Francisco could both make pushes. A lot of people, especially around where I live in Seattle, are trying to tell me that the Seahawks are going to be there. I'm like, all right, let's chill out, guys.
Can't wait for Steezy to
right.
He's
already pushing that narrative. He already is. But it's hard for me to see. I think the Cowboys match up very well with the Eagles. They don't match up very well with the Niners. Thankfully, I think that the Cowboys wind up being the 1 seed. And I think that the Niners probably get bounced by the Eagles a little bit earlier in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do have the Cowboys going to the Super Bowl, not against the Chiefs, though.
I know who you have. There's no way you pick him for MVP and you don't pick him to go to the Super Bowl.
Of course. Listen. Let's be 100% honest here. I think the mayor of Cincinnati cost the Bengals a Super Bowl championship this year, 100%. I think if he would have kept his mouth shut and stopped all that Joe Burrow is your dad thing, the Bengals would have made it to him on the Super Bowl. I think they would have beat. Hey, I'm not going to say they would have beat the. I'm not going to say they would have beat the brakes off the Eagles, but that would be disrespectful. They would have beat the Eagles though. And the reason why they would have beat the Eagles is I understand the Eagles last year were a better team. We're going to wrap in a second. I know they were a better team last year than the Rams were when they went to the Super Bowl, but if we remember, right, like Joe Burrow's that guy. Like Joe, like I think what we saw from that playoff run they made to the Super Bowl is that it doesn't matter how many times you knock Joe Burrow down, not to sound cliche, he's going to get back up, physically and mentally, like literally and figuratively, he's going to get back up. And when you have literally, there is not a better wide receiver trio in the league than Chase, Higgins, and Boyd. And I would go as far to say is there is not a better skill position group between those three and Joe Mixon in the league. I think the only team that could make the argument would be the San Francisco 49ers because they have Deebo Samuel and they have Christian McCaffrey. Like maybe you want to throw George Kittle in there, but like in Brandon Ayuk, I don't know.
Steezy's gonna be so upset if he sees this.
Steezy is he'll be here next week. We'll have our back and forth. I mean, look, this is no disrespect. Look, this is no disrespect to Seattle. Okay, let's be 100% honest here, though. Jackson Smith and Jigba.
I'm okay if it's disrespect to Seattle.
He's not proven. He hasn't played a real NFL game yet. So like we'll see. And I love Tyler Lockett as much as the next guy, but all this rhetoric around Tyler Lockett is starting to annoy me.
I think it's going too far the other way. I think it is. Like it is. Like I like Tyler Lockett, and I even picked him in fantasy this year. And I usually try to stay away from picking Seahawks. But like there's a lot of people who like will try to tell you he's like a bottom tier 1, and I just don't see it.
He's not.
He's not.
I also try to.
He's a great
players. Yeah, I also try to stay away from picking Seahawks players, but I had a 10th pick in our fantasy league, and Kenneth Walker was just sitting on the board in like the 4th round.
Oh, in the 4th round. Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought you went 10th overall. I was like, what are you doing, Marcus?
No. 10th overall, I took a wide receiver. I actually have a really good fantasy team, actually. I'm pretty – with the 10th pick, I have Joe Burrow, Stephon Diggs, and Jalen Waddle. I'd say that's pretty good with the 10th pick. I'd say that's pretty good. But no, I didn't take him 10th overall. Like in the 4th or 5th round, though, he was still there. I took Kenneth Walker. I am also slightly ashamed, but not really ashamed, to admit that Geno Smith is my backup quarterback. But it's totally fine. I'll play him in both games when they have to play the Cardinals because the Cardinals suck. So like it's totally fine. It makes perfect sense. Yeah. It's always a pleasure to have my guy Emmett on the show, especially in a situation like this when it's a pinch hit. We do have to let Emmett go because he has personal things to attend to. But this is the end of the show, really. Like we kind of sped through the show. Sorry, but also I wanted to make sure that Emmett could get to what he already had planned because if you guys don't know, he lives on the West Coast. As you can see out the crack of his window, the sun is
bright outside
over there. So let's let him enjoy his 6:37 late afternoon plans, whatever he's got going on. But before you go, please, Emmett, let everybody know where they can find you and all of your content.
Of course, at Emmett J. Savoras on Instagram, Twitter, at Savoras, just my last name on TikTok, like you read it there on the screen. And then the Emmett Savoras Show on YouTube. I'm going to start pumping out content again. I got a little bored. I'm not going to lie. I've not been on it as I wanted to be. The draft deflated me. I was not Lucas Van Ness was not the pick I wanted. Sorry, guys. But I should be back on it. You know, NFL season, we're here. We've made it. We did it. So, at the Emmett Savoras Show on YouTube. And again, Emmett J. Savoras on Instagram and Twitter.
Absolutely. And you guys know where to find me at GTP Markets on all social media platforms. I did take a little break from TikTok over the course of the summer. I wanted to get my mind right. I had a lot of personal things going on. The NFL season is back. So if you follow me on TikTok, here's the deal. Starting tomorrow morning, every single Thursday, I'm going to drop my picks for the week. You guys can duet, stitch the video, whatever you want, and go along with me. If you get a better overall record for the season than me, maybe, just maybe, there will be a prize. I haven't decided quite yet, but you can still tune in too long. I do challenges on there. I think Emmett knows because he's seen some of them. All that stuff is coming back starting this weekend. I just need to take a break for the summer. There's a lot going on. So please make sure you're following. Also, in case you've been living on the rock, and you haven't been tuning in to Talk to Marcus, next Tuesday is the debut episode of the Protect Our Queens podcast presented by the Give It a Shot Network. It will be live right here on the Give It a Shot Network YouTube channel and Facebook at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with my guy, Martin Stories of Basketball Society, the founder of Basketball Society. I'm awesome. I'm so pleased to announce. We announced it on Friday. I'm going to announce it again. High school hoop star and Jordan brand athlete Kiyomi McMiller is officially going to be our first guest on that show. She is a dog. If you don't know who it is, check her out. Kiyomi McMiller, Kiyomi McMiller. Please, if you don't know who she is, study up on her before next Tuesday so you can find out. Me and my guy Martin, we're going to be talking to her on the show live, and also we're going to talk about a couple different things. So please make sure you tune in for that. And as I said earlier, halfway through the show, we do now have merch. Get yours today, www.giveusashot.network/shop. If you filter it to latest, it'll pop right up at the top. We got them in black, purple, and white. Super proud to have merch because I've been wanting merch for a long time. Finally got able to get that done. So for my guy, Emmett Savoris of the Emmett Savoris Show, this is Marcus of Go Talk Marcus signing off. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, you guys enjoy the rest of your lives.